Last night, my father-in-law sneered at my disgusting excuse for dinner in front of my children, and my husband just laughed along with him. They expected me to cry, or maybe make a scene. They never expected me to just stop. I stopped cooking. I stopped cleaning. I stopped holding their entire lives together. They think it's a temporary tantrum. They have no idea I'm packing my bags and planning to let them drown in the mess they created. Before anyone comes for me in the comments, let me just say that I am fully aware that family dinners are a universal form of low-grade torture. They are a social contract we sign in the name of love, an agreement to endure awkward silences, passive-aggressive compliments, and unsolicited life advice. I know the routine. You smile, you nod, you take a tactical wine break in the guest bathroom while frantically texting your group chat. He's doing it again, accompanied by a string of skull emojis. You survive. But what happened at my house last night wasn't the standard, garden variety awkwardness. Last night was a paradigm shift. It was the universe holding up a giant, unflattering mirror, forcing me to see exactly where I stood in the carefully constructed ecosystem of my own marriage. And the reflection was bleak. The message, however, was received loud and clear. For context, this weekly torment is a tradition known as Thursday night dinner. My in-laws, William and Alexa, descend upon our home every Thursday, a ritual my husband, Kieran, insists is good for the kids. We have two, a daughter and a son, both under 10, and I'm not a monster. I don't want to sever their connection to their grandparents. I just wish their visits didn't feel like a high-stakes performance review for which I am perpetually unprepared. Kieran's parents are relics from a bygone era. His father, William, is a man who genuinely believes that a woman's primary function is to be an attractive, silent, and grateful accessory to her husband's life. He speaks in pronouncements, his opinions delivered as incontrovertible facts. His mother, Alexa, is a master of the subtle art of undermining. She's the type of woman who will reach out and tuck a stray piece of your hair behind your ear mid-sentence, a gesture that feels both intimate and deeply condescending. She'll look at a new dress you're excited about and say, with a perfectly placid smile, "Oh, you're wearing that today?" leaving you to unravel the layers of meaning in that simple question for the rest of the evening. My survival strategy has always been to keep it simple. I make easy dinners because by Thursday, my well of patience and energy has run dangerously low. Yesterday was no exception. After a day of fielding frantic calls from the school, refereeing a meltdown over a lost water bottle, and juggling 3 different work deadlines, I was in no mood to play the part of a gourmet chef. I made a simple pasta bake. It's a dish of comfort and convenience. Pasta, a hidden layer of vegetables the kids won't notice, a generous amount of cheese, baked until bubbly and golden. The kids love it. It's easy. It's fine. The moment they walked through the door, I could sense the storm clouds gathering. William had his mood face on, a familiar scowl that suggested the very act of existing in my home was a personal affront to him. He's been particularly insufferable lately, a potent combination of aging, irrelevance, and the dawning realization that no one is particularly interested in his opinions on how the world has gone to hell. The performance began, as it often did, with the food. As I carried the casserole dish to the table, he started making these exaggerated sniffing noises, his nose wrinkled, as if he'd just detected a gas leak. My kids, bless their chaotic little hearts, started to giggle, which only emboldened him. He now had an audience. He poked at the serving on his plate with his fork, a look of profound disappointment on his face. "Is this the best you can do?" he asked, his voice a low, theatrical grumble. I wasn't even surprised. This was his standard opening act. But then came the betrayal. Kieran, my husband, the man who was supposed to be my partner, my teammate, instead of shutting his father down, instead of even just ignoring the comment, he joined in. A small, smug smirk played on his lips. "Dad, be nice," he said, but his tone was anything but. It was a joke, a shared moment of male camaraderie at my expense. William, seizing the opportunity, launched into a tirade about how I had only married Kieran for his name and the family fortune he seemed to believe we possessed, a wild fantasy considering our mountain of a mortgage and a car that makes a new and terrifying noise every week. I tried to intervene, to protect the fragile peace and the little ears at the table. "Can we please not do this in front of the children?" I pleaded, my voice barely a whisper. But Kieran cut me off, his voice sharp. "Maybe if you put half as much effort into our marriage as you do into feeling sorry for yourself, we'd have a decent meal on the table." The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. A profound silence descended upon the table. Alexa, a master of strategic avoidance, poured herself another glass of wine and became intensely interested in something on her phone. The kids, who had been giggling moments before, fell silent, their eyes wide and uncertain. The silence was worse than the laughter. It was the sound of a family choosing sides, and I was on the wrong one. I sat there, frozen, a prisoner at my own dinner table. If I argued, I was being dramatic. If I left, I was making a scene. So I stayed, and the onslaught continued. William pivoted to my job. He found it cute that I worked, but he felt my focus should be on the home, because that's what real women do. He then launched into a critique of my wardrobe, declaring that leggings were not real pants, and that in his day, women had a sense of self-respect and cared about their appearance. I was wearing a comfortable sweater and leggings because I had spent the day cleaning my house in preparation for his visit. Alexa remained a silent, passive observer, her gaze fixed on a point on the wall just over my head, as if waiting for an apparition. And Kieran just sat there, picking at his food, his expression one of bored detachment, as if this was all just a tedious but necessary family ritual. My daughter, in a small, brave act of defiance, tried to say that she liked the pasta. William talked right over her, his voice booming. Of course she does. Children don't know any better. A wave of white-hot rage washed over me. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him to shut his misogynistic mouth, but I was so profoundly tired. The fight had gone out of me, replaced by a deep, weary resignation. So I retreated. I picked up my phone and disappeared into the meaningless scroll of social media. I sent a text to my sister. Kill me now. She responded with a gif of a cat falling off a table. It wasn't helpful. I could hear William's voice droning on, something about my generation being soft, about how a wife with my attitude would have been sent packing in his day. And then I heard Kieran laugh. A genuine, hearty laugh. It was a sound I hadn't heard from him in a long time, and the fact that it was at my expense was a special kind of cruelty. I looked at him, at this man I had loved, and I didn't recognize him. I understood his desperate, lifelong quest for his father's approval, but I could not understand why that approval had to be purchased with my dignity. At some point, the need to do something, anything, became overwhelming. I stood up and began clearing the plates, the clatter of silverware a welcome disruption to the tense silence. You look upset, Alexa observed, her voice laced with a false, saccharine concern. I ignored her. I carried the plates to the kitchen and placed them in the sink with a little more force than was strictly necessary. I didn't slam them, but I didn't care if they chipped. Are you going to cry now? Kieran called from the dining room, his voice dripping with condescension. It was a question so absurd, so completely detached from the reality of the situation, that it almost made me laugh. I was so far beyond tears. I'm fine, I said, my voice flat. He rolled his eyes. The kids, sensing the dinner was finally, mercifully over, escaped to their rooms, their tablets a welcome portal to a world where their family wasn't actively imploding. The rest of the evening was a blur of forced small talk and simmering resentment. I finished the dishes and retreated to our bedroom, locking the door behind me. I spent the next hour scrolling through TikTok, an act of petty, silent rebellion. When Kieran came in later, he didn't say a word. He just changed his clothes and got into bed. I lay there in the darkness, the silence between us a gaping chasm, and I wondered how I was supposed to wake up in the morning and pretend that everything was normal. I thought about leaving, about packing a bag for me and the kids, and just driving anywhere. But the sheer logistics of it, the effort, felt overwhelming. I thought about what my friends would say, the well-meaning but useless advice about how in-laws are just like that, or how Kieran must be stressed. I felt utterly, completely alone. And as I lay there, replaying every condescending word, every dismissive gesture, a cold, hard certainty began to form in the pit of my stomach. I could not let this go. I could not wake up and pretend. I was not the person who just took it and smiled. Not anymore. The morning after the dinner from hell, the house was shrouded in a tense, unnatural silence. Kieran was in the kitchen, acting as if the previous night had been nothing more than a bad dream, a minor blip in the otherwise smooth-running program of our lives. He offered me the last of the oat milk with an air of magnanimous generosity that made my skin crawl. I just stared at him, marveling at his capacity for denial. The kids were a barometer of the atmospheric pressure in the house. They were quiet, subdued, eating their cereal with a solemnity usually reserved for a state funeral. My daughter, who lives in her blue light-up sneakers, just shrugged when I asked if she wanted to wear them. They knew. They had felt the shift. After I dropped them at school, I sat in my car in the parking lot, the silence a welcome relief. I texted my friend, Tara. We weren't incredibly close, but she had a refreshingly no-nonsense approach to life. Family dinner was a dumpster fire, I typed. Coffee? Her reply was immediate, on my way. Over lattes, I recounted the entire, sordid tale. Tara listened, her expression growing more and more incredulous. Your father-in-law is a fossil, she declared, and your husband is a spineless jellyfish for letting him get away with it. She was right. Why do you let them treat you like that? She asked, a question I had no real answer for. By the time I got home, I had a new resolve. That evening, I did not cook. I ordered pizza for the kids and a salad for myself. When Kieran came home and saw the pizza boxes, he sneered, "Are you done sulking yet?" "Maybe I'm just done, period," I replied, my voice calm. His mother, Alexa, chose that moment to make an entrance, walking in without knocking, her face a mask of feigned concern. She was here, she announced, to smooth things over. She pulled me into the hallway and launched into her well-rehearsed monologue about how William is just old-fashioned and how I shouldn't take his words to heart. "He called me useless in front of my own children, Alexa," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "He doesn't mean it like that," she insisted. "Yes," I said, "he does. And I'm done pretending that it's okay." Her final, desperate plea was an appeal to my wifely duty. "You're not like the other women in our family," she said, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper. "You don't just do what needs to be done to keep the peace." "Maybe," I replied, a small, dangerous smile playing on my lips. "That's the problem." She left, slamming the door behind her. The next morning, I went on strike. I did not do the laundry. I did not pick up the dirty socks. I did not wipe the counters or unload the dishwasher. I was no longer the invisible engine that kept the household running. The house, predictably, began to grind to a halt. Kieran, confronted with the reality of his own domestic incompetence, grew more and more irritable. The tension in the house was a thick, palpable thing, and it finally snapped on Tuesday. I came home to find Alexa in my kitchen, a self-appointed domestic savior, reorganizing my fridge. "Things seem to be slipping," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You can go home now, Alexa," I told her. She left in a huff, and moments later, Kieran stormed in, demanding to know what I had said to his mother. The argument that followed was the final, violent death rattle of our marriage. He accused me of disrespecting his family. I accused him of allowing them to disrespect me. He got in my face, his voice rising to a shout. And for the first time in our relationship, I pushed him. Not hard, but enough to make him back off. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and rage, and then he punched the wall behind me, leaving a spiderweb of cracks in the drywall. After that, the Cold War began in earnest. He slept on the couch. I slept in our bed, the empty space beside me a welcome relief. On Thursday, he came home from work and found me and the kids working on a puzzle at the kitchen table. The sight of this simple, domestic scene seemed to enrage him. "Is this how we live now?" he roared. "In a pigsty?" He then swept the half-finished puzzle from the table, sending 1,000 cardboard pieces scattering across the floor. My daughter burst into tears. "Get out," I said, my voice a low, dangerous whisper. He left, slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. That was it, the final straw. I packed a bag for me and the kids, and I drove the 3 hours to my mother's house. The barrage of calls and texts began almost immediately. Kieran, Alexa, even William, all of them a chorus of blame, guilt, and manipulation. They wanted me to come home, to apologize, to resume my role as the family doormat. But something in me had fundamentally, irrevocably, broken. I was done. I spent the next week at my mom's, breathing in the clean air of a home where I was loved, not tolerated. I watched my children relax, their laughter returning, their small bodies finally unclenching from the constant tension of our home. Kieran's texts became more desperate, a pathetic cycle of rage and remorse. He even tried to use our daughter as a pawn, texting her on an old tablet, telling her to have mommy call daddy. In that moment, I knew I could never go back. He had crossed a line from which there was no return. I am not a perfect wife or mother. I am flawed and messy, and often tired. But I am not a doormat. I am not a scapegoat. And I will no longer set myself on fire to keep others warm. He can have his house, his parents, his anger. I will take my children, my peace, and my freedom.